office and an office in their district, so you can advocate even at the federal level, right in your own backyard. So there's really any number of ways that you can get involved. And I love this quote from Margaret Mead on this slide, that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think that's a great reminder that we all have the power to affect change, especially when we join our voices together. So the next slide, please. You know, in the last session, we talked about this a little bit, about the importance of the recovery community and families coming together to join our voices. And I think, you know, I just like to take a second to underscore that in this session. By coordinating our messages, we're louder. And it's so important that we just make a lot of noise. There are a lot of other really important issues that policymakers are hearing about on a daily basis. And so it's really important that that we're loud and we get to be heard. And it's true. I worked on Capitol Hill for 11 years, and the squeaky wheel does get the grease. And it's just the way it is. And so together we can squeak louder. So it's really important that where we can, where there's common ground, we're linking arms, we're coordinating, and we're being loud together. And I think also, you know, one of the challenges that our field has is the legacy of anonymity. And I think that that has caused people not to speak up, and the stigma involved has caused people not to speak up. But it's really important that people use their voices collectively for change. And I think that's most important in the arena of funding. There are a lot of worthy causes that are fighting for a very small pot of money. And that's true at the state level, it's true at the federal level, it's true in communities. So I think the more we can make the case that ours is one of the most pressing issues of our time, the more successful we'll be in getting more dollars committed to addressing it. Next slide, please. So at the partnership, we have what we call our recipe for policy change, and that is data plus stories equals policy change. And we really know that when you combine data showing the overdose rate increasing, showing the number of people who are in recovery, showing recovery is possible, whatever the data point is, and you pair it with a story, especially as it regards in regards to the where the system is broken, and whether that's insurance, whether that's the healthcare system, whether that's the criminal justice system. If you can explain to someone using data, using research that you know, people have put forward, and you combine that with a story of how that's impacted someone's life, that's the special sauce. That's what makes a difference. And so in the back, we have these cards, shameless plug for the cards. And on the cards, it says, your story can change someone else's. And I know we talked about this a little bit in the last session as well, how it's really important to be able to take stories from families, from individuals across the country, and show collectively it's not just this one-off that someone had a bad experience with their insurance company. This is a pattern. This is a practice. This is something that we need to address on a policy level. And the more stories we can collect that show those broken pieces of our system, the better off we'll be. So we've got a really easy way. There's a QR code on this for people who are tuning in online. You can text story to 55753 and get a series of prompts about how to submit your story to our database, where we can then use it to add to our collection of stories, really showing the mosaic of brokenness and urging policymakers to be proactive and to fix things. So next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today is different ways people have advocated and can advocate. And there are some really, really easy ways, and there are some really, really hard ways, and lots of ways in between. So I think my goal today is to have people not be scared of being an advocate, to really feel like if you have a story, then you're an expert in what you've seen and what you've experienced, and you can take that expertise and weigh in. I know that the partnership has easy ways. If you go to drugfree.org, and go under the Get Involved tab. There are ways you can sign action alerts really easily. All you need to know is your name and your zip code. You don't even have to know who your member of Congress is. Everything kind of fills in automatically. So there are ways. I know Recovery Advocacy Project has a similar tool on their website. A lot of other groups do as well. So wherever you find your outlet to advocate, don't let your sort of shyness about sort of weighing in and feeling like you can make a difference stand in the way. And I know at a previous session today, Carol McDade had an amazing QR code where people could weigh in about the 10% set aside in the block grant for recovery programs, which is really important. And that's, a great outlet too. So there are some really easy ways, kind of baby steps to being an advocate. And then there are bigger ways as well. So we're going to talk about that a little more, and we're done with the slides, so you can shut those off. And so I'm going to turn to our panel to introduce themselves. And again, just really excited about the discussion we can have, because these three ladies have done amazing advocacy work in very different ways. And I hope that it will serve as an inspiration to people about the advocacy work that each and every one of you can be doing. So first we have Jacqueline Brown. Her advocacy grew out of losing her brother Mark to an overdose in 2018. Sitting next to her, we have Carlia Summers. She's a woman in long-term recovery and the executive director of the Rainbow of Love Recovery Foundation. And then finally, Cheryl Jouar, who founded Team Sharing after losing her son Corey to an overdose in 2015. And her passion as an advocate and commitment to honoring those lost to overdose was redoubled after losing her son Sean to an overdose earlier this year. So with that, Jacqueline, I'll turn to you to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Ooh. Hi, everyone. We always talk about humanizing addiction, and I want to humanize myself. I am so nervous right now. So if I sound, it's because of that. So my name's Jacqueline. I live in the Phoenix area in Arizona. And someone mentioned this morning about being an accidental advocate, and that's what I would consider myself. My brother was involved in a car accident in 2010, and he was in a wheelchair for a couple months. So while he was in the wheelchair, he was given oxycodone, and that evolved into a heroin addiction. And as time went on, there were periods of recovery and relapse, and of course, there's always hope. But on November 16th, 2018, he passed away of a heroin overdose. And when that happened, it was something where up until that point, I didn't mention anything to a grand group of people like this about what he was going through, because I felt like that is his, business. Who am I to go ahead and spread that to everyone? We had family and close friends who knew about it, but otherwise I didn't feel that it was my place. And, once he passed away, I felt like that stigma was very evident, and I could feel it online when people would even comment and just say, oh, what happened? An overdose? And those comments just lit this fire in me to fight everyone. And additionally, the stigma along with our family, because then are people looking at us thinking, well, what did they do wrong? What did we mess up on? And so I had never spoke about it before. And finally, actually in his eulogy is when I decided to speak about it. And there was about 150 people there. And I remember afterwards feeling like there was some sort of weight lifted off my shoulder, because I knew everyone was thinking it. If you have someone, that's the elephant in the room when they go, hey, how's Mark? There's that pause, they don't want to say it. So initially, I went on the internet. Everyone goes on the internet. I went on the internet after my brother passed away, and I found Shatterproof initially. And when I found Shatterproof, I thought, okay, something that fights against stigma. This is really great. And I got in touch with the amazing Lynn Nouvelle, and she was honestly the first person that made me feel like, hey, your voice could matter. So it was my birthday, so a few months later, and I decided to tell the social media world about what had happened, because unless you were in attendance at his funeral, nobody knew. And I just posted my eulogy and I said, this was a focus on his life. I would prefer to focus on the beauty of his life than the manner of his death. That's how everyone should be. And so I created an event, a fundraising event for my brother, which I called Mark's Mile. And it was a 1 mile walk just to commemorate him, you know, to promote the idea of reducing the stigma. And that happened in May, so 6 months after, because I felt like after the funeral, everyone just forgets. That's how I felt. Like, okay, let's all move on. The world keeps spinning. And here I am crying every day, grieving. So I'm like, everyone has to remember Mark. I got to do this. So 6 months, let's have this walk. We had 100 people come out. I did a fundraiser associated with it. And then after that happened, I was invited to speak at the Shatterproof event in LA, their 5K in November. And it was about almost a year to the day to when he passed. And I thought, this is going to be a really beautiful thing. It's a year later. Look how it comes full circle. And I gave this speech. And afterwards, I thought, I'm just going to be healed and it'll be great. And I felt terrible. I was so drained and I was so exhausted, because what I didn't realize is I was keeping myself busy nonstop. Just as my friend Patty says, there was no white space on my calendar. I wanted to constantly be doing something, and almost to make up for what I didn't do when he was alive, which is a really messed up thing. So I took some time away and I started to learn about harm reduction. And harm reduction is it was a very difficult thing for me to embrace, because the idea that, hey, I'm going to push naloxone, this drug that could have saved my brother's life if it were in our home, it was very difficult for me to grasp that idea. So I ended up taking just a random online Coursera course on the addicted brain to just really understand the science of it. And so that I almost had like ammo when I started to really advocate, because so many people think addiction's a choice, it's a moral failing, whatever it may be, and that's not the case. So I then got an email about, hey, you should do Mobilize Recovery. And I was like, no, I shouldn't. Like, I'm not in recovery. My brother is not in recovery. I don't think I should do this. And they're like, it's a really good opportunity for advocacy. And since it was 2020, I had nothing else to do. So I was like, all right, why not? And I remember feeling very intimidated, because you can see everyone's profile, everyone's a CEO or a president or something. And I'm like, I'm an ambassador, hey. And I just felt very out of my league, you know? So we go into this first breakout room and everyone's going to talk to each other. 3 other women are in there and they all work in the field. They're all in recovery. And I'm like, I don't think I should be here. You know, I'm not in recovery. I lost my brother to an overdose. I don't think I should be here. And one woman said to me, well, you are in recovery. You're recovering from the loss of your brother. And of course I started crying, because that's what I do. And from that point on, having someone like within this community empower me and say, yes, you belong in this community, meant so much to me. So after that, I got connected with someone in the Phoenix area, and I started volunteering with Shot in the Dark, which is a local syringe service program. And I have been doing that ever since. This past May, I became the volunteer coordinator. And there really wasn't a set volunteer program in place. So it was like, make it what you want. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. So I put together this program, and I've doubled the amount of volunteers that we initially had in the last few months. Thank you. in regards to fundraising, in that time frame from my brother's like Mark Smile until I went to LA, I raised over $10,000 for Shatterproof just by posting on social media. I was just really annoying on social media and telling everyone, hey, you should really go against the stigma, thanks. And every Monday, I still have what's called Mark Monday, where I share a memory of him or just something funny about him, because to me, he's still very much alive. He drives what I do. So I'm a part of the Recovery Advocacy Project now on the Arizona team. I am a field organizer, so I help out a couple other teams within RAP. The Florida team, the Missouri team, the Illinois team. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, I was a coach yesterday. So I got to coach public narrative. And honestly, I would have never done any of this because I didn't think that my voice mattered. But as a family member, our voices do matter. All of us family members are in recovery. We are constantly, like Denise was saying in the prior session, like having that heart attack, seeing a phone number pop up, and just that anxiety. Like it is when someone passes away, that is PTSD, you know? And you know, I truly think that family members, and especially siblings, I'm just going to say this, that siblings are really overlooked in this area. And I would love it if more siblings would speak up, because we have a very powerful voice. You know, I don't want to take away from parents, but, you know, Mark was supposed to grow up with me. You know, he was supposed to grow old with me. Sorry. So to not have him here is very difficult, and it's something I struggle with every day. But I continue to fight every day. When I do my harm reduction, I'm working with people just like Mark. These people have been turned away in other areas of their life because let me know when you're back in recovery and we'll talk again. And these people are isolated and they need help. And it has been an amazing part of my life to be in harm reduction, and they know they can go somewhere they won't be stigmatized. So that's my soapbox for harm reduction, but that kind of sums me up.
Carlia.
Hi, I'm Carlia Summers, and I am the founder and executive director of Rainbow Love Recovery Foundation, and I am in Frederick, Maryland. And so just a little backstory on myself. I am a person, I identify as a person in long-term recovery. I have a sobriety date of March 28th, 2006. Thank you. And I grew up in a broken home. My father went to prison at a very young age. My mother remarried. My dad had other children. I mean, there was a lot going on. And so, you know, I continued that pattern of what I was taught, you know, and so I got pregnant at the age of 22, which is also later when, after I gave birth to my son, I decided to enter treatment because raising him in a broken home just wasn't going to be an option for me. And so during that time, I struggled. I struggled a lot. I went to inpatient treatment, and I felt like when I got out, I was just kind of thrown out there as a single mother and told to fend for myself. I had to go to IOP, I had to go to treatment services, but I also had to work. I had to take care of an infant child. I had to worry about how I was going to afford childcare. I couldn't afford to live on my own because there was no way I was going to pay for daycare and live on my own. And so all these things, and then don't even get into the transportation and all that stuff. I mean, I remember at one point saying it would be easier just to go use drugs and alcohol than it is to do this. That's how defeated I was. And so I remember, you know, just working jobs just to make ends meet until I decided that I really had enough. I wanted to advocate in some way, shape, or form for mothers in recovery. And so I started as a peer at my local health department. And I want to give a shout out to all the peers, by the way. You don't get enough credit for what you do. I'm a big fan of the peer level because meeting people where they are is tough work, and it does not get enough recognition. So I hope you all stop and pat yourselves on the back for what you do. And so I eventually worked my way up and, went back to school to an addictions counselor. And I mean, if you met me for 2 seconds, I'm not a desk person. So I was like, okay, I did that. That's enough of that. I need to be out here doing more. And so that's what I did. I just stepped out on faith. I left my job. And I founded Rainbow Love Recovery Foundation, which is transitional living, which allows mothers to recover with their children. I do not believe that any mother should ever have to face the obstacles that I had to face in early recovery. You should never have to choose between your recovery and providing for your child. And this is something that goes on day in and day out. I mean, I could probably open 20 houses and it just would not be enough to meet the need. And so I advocate for this widely. I mean, there is no length that I won't go to or any mountaintop I won't scream from because it's just such a need. And the childcare barriers, the housing barriers, all of these things have contributed to mothers wanting to go back out from feeling defeated. It has contributed to, additional mental health symptoms. And so these are the things that, as a mom, no one can advocate for this better than I can because I've been there. I know that feeling of defeat. I know what it feels like to want to just quit because you just, how am I going to make this work? And you may have some people in the community that really want to help you make it work, but even at some point, they don't have the resources. And so I just keep showing up every single day, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that these mothers are able to get the resources that they need, as well as working with Child Protective Services, probation, and parole. I do believe that we all make mistakes, and that doesn't just happen within recovery. That happens within our lives as human beings. And so no mother should have her kids permanently snatched due to a substance use disorder. And so this is something else that I do within the programming is parenting classes, which will allow them to learn how to be mothers, but also transitions and reunifies them back with their children so that they are not permanently placed in foster care or other homes. And so this is an ongoing thing for me. I'm grateful to be here, and I have Cheryl next to me, and of course, my rap team member, T, who I love, and they really just light a fire in me. They are true warriors, and I do not believe that anyone should have to bury a child, and this generational curse can be broken, and I will not stop until it is.
Thank you, Carlia. Cheryl?
Hi, so my name is Cheryl Jouer, and I am the founder of a nonprofit organization called Team Sharing. We're an organization of parents that have all lost our children to substance use disorder. Back in February 24th, 2011, I lost my son, Corey, to an overdose. Back then, I did not know anything about addiction. He tried to explain it to me. I thought it was a choice for him. So when I got that phone call, I had to live with that for the rest of my life. But I've learned to forgive myself for that. I suffered in my grief for the next couple of years alone. I didn't know anybody that had lost a child, let alone to addiction. And then one day on the internet, I met a couple of moms that had also lost their child, and they were all local to me in Massachusetts. and one of them said, hey, let's get together and let's go out to dinner. So we did. We went out to dinner. There was actually 7 of us. And we sat around that table, and for the first time in my life, all that grief and pain and sorrow and heartache that I felt, they felt the exact same way. And there were times during those years before I met them that I felt like I just wanted to die because I wasn't going to kill myself. I just couldn't live with the pain any longer. And they felt the same way too. And so from there, I started a group messenger, and we blew up Facebook on group messenger. And this was like in August 2015. So October 2015, I said, hey, there's a Fed Up rally down in Washington, D.C. Anybody want to go? And the next thing I know, all 7 of us were on an airplane heading down to Washington, D.C. at a Fed Up rally. It was insane. So when I came, while I was there, I met some other parents from around the country. And so when I came back, I said, this messenger thing isn't working. So I'm going to start a Facebook group. And from this group, when you want to come into the group, you need to share with me your child's name, date of birth, and date of death, because one of the biggest complaints we talked about was that over time, people forget. We'll never forget. And so it created a safe place for us all to go to. And from that, we grew. Massachusetts now has 800 members. But what we do is we go out, we go to the movies, we do a lot of things together. But what I found is that our child mattered, and we'll never forget them. And so we decided to do some advocacy because of the stigma and the shame that we all felt because of society. We wanted to prove that, you know what, our child mattered, and so our voices matter. From this point, I created, we created 25 state chapters. We have a national organization. Thank you. We have a chapter in Canada, and we have a siblings chapter, just to let you know. And so, but because we have this together, we get to grow together and we learn from each other. But there's nothing like a mom who's lost a child who wants to get out there and do something to make a difference. And so that's what we do. And I don't know if you want me to start sharing this advocacy. Okay, so, 2 years ago, I came to Mobilize Recovery. I met some moms there as well. We were like the elephant in the room, and nobody knew what to do with us. They were like, what are they doing here? How are they going to make a difference? And thank goodness for Ryan, because I had met Ryan before that. And he believed in us. And so all the ones that had came, all the moms that were there, they have gone out and they have made a difference, and they won't stop. They're not going to stop. So 2 years ago, somebody had suggested that we lower the flags to half staff on August 31st, which is International Overdose Awareness Day. It's the one day of the year that we have to recognize the lives of our children or our loved ones, that they mattered, that their lives mattered. So we started a campaign, and we started within each group, we started contacting our governors. Please lower the flags to half staff on this one day. And 2 years ago, we got a handful that did do that. But we started it on Facebook under an event, and it didn't really work that well. And I'm telling you this because anything can happen if you put your mind to it. But sometimes it's going to take 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. It's going to take a few times to make it happen. We're not stopping this. It's still going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but we're not going to stop. So we did get a few states that did lower the flags, and everybody's willing to give out proclamations all day long because those aren't that hard to write, and they pretty much, they think they're going to satisfy us and shut us up, but that's not going to happen. So this year, what we did, since we had COVID, was we created a group on Facebook called Flags at Half Staff. And we just invited everybody we knew. And from all the groups, and it doesn't just have to be parents, it was anybody. And I know there's a lot of people in here that are in that group. And we just said, you know what, we don't know how to do this, but let's figure it out. Contact your legislator, contact your senator, contact somebody, and just say, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to lower the flags on August 31st, International Overdose Awareness Day, for our children, our loved ones. And we want to pass a bill because the governors all said no, and they all came up with different excuses, although we know that they've lowered them for different other things. So we know the stigma is still out there. That's okay, we're still going to fight. So, so this year we thought, you know what, let's change it up and let's get resolutions and laws. Let's get them passed. And we've got the flags lowered in 9 states with bills that we got passed. And we've gotten proclamations in 15 states. And the flags didn't get lowered federally. Let me go back a bit. I asked my Congresswoman, Lori Trahan, if she would write a letter to the President of the United States and ask him if he would lower the flag to half staff. She did write that letter, and she had several Congress people sign on to the letter. She also wrote it as a resolution. She worked really, really, really hard to try to get this to happen. And unfortunately, it didn't this year. What we did get was a resolution, and let me just. From the President of the United States, and we're very, very proud of this. So he declared August 29th to September 4th, Overdose Awareness Week for our loved ones. So this is the advocacy we're working on now. We've worked on a million other projects too, but this is our biggest, latest, and greatest. We're not going to stop. When I got this in the mail just the other day, it came in a big FedEx box, and there was another box within it. And like Marsha said, just this recently, June 25th, I lost my second son to an overdose, which makes me fight even harder now. But within that box was a letter, was a flag. And it was a flag that was flown over the state capitol in Washington, D.C. on August 31st, 2021. And it was in memory of both my boys. So things are going to happen, and it's going to take a while, but we're not going to stop, just to let you know.
And just to let folks know, we have an action alert on the partnership's website to get people to lift their voices in support of that resolution. And especially after hearing Cheryl speak, I hope everyone can go on and sign it and make this a priority. Because as Cheryl was saying, and it didn't happen, I kept saying in my head, I kept saying, yet, it didn't happen yet. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so many more things are going to happen too. So, so I think, as I said at the beginning, what I love about this panel is everyone has taken their experiences and gone in a different path with it. And I just, looking at the goal of trying to encourage people to lift their voices and be advocates, if you could all just talk for a second, and then I want to open it up to questions from the audience, but if you could also just talk for a second about, what you knew about advocacy before starting on the advocacy path, because again, sort of, that fear of, I don't have a degree in this. I don't, I haven't tried to make any other bill become a law. Like what do I know about this? What does my voice matter? I just want to make sure that we just cut through that and don't have that be a barrier anymore. So if you could all just talk for a second about, did you have a background in this, and were you scared, and how'd you get over it?
I had zero background in this, and I felt very intimidated because I didn't know how a bill became a law. To be quite honest, I didn't care. But there was a session that someone had put together via Zoom, and it was how a bill becomes a law. And I thought, okay, we can ease into this and do that. And it was scary because I'm like, who am I? Again, it's like that imposter syndrome. Who am I? Like, I'm going to fight for a bill. And, there was a bill that went up for legalization of syringe service programs in Arizona because we've been doing this all underground and illegally. And the bill did pass this year after many years of being denied. So on September 28th, we will finally be legalized. I mean, even if we weren't, we were still going to do it anyway. But I think that if you are intimidated by that, start with something as simple as a little YouTube video and focus on the bills that are very important to you. You don't have to learn all the bills, but I would say focus on the ones that mean the most to you first.
I'm a lot like Jacqueline. I knew absolutely nothing about advocacy. I was on the other side of it, on the treatment side of it, which is any of you are in the field, it's completely different. What I did know is that I wanted to make change. So that's all that really mattered to me. And I think that's how anyone gets into advocacy. You see a need and you want to meet that need. And I think, the word can be very intimidating, like it, has been set up here. But if we look at it as we just want to make change, we don't want things to stay the same, I think that we can get a lot more people on board to make a difference.
For me, I think the parents of child loss is what inspired me to do something, because they were so broken. And not that I wasn't broken, but I had longer time, and our collective voices together, I knew would make a difference. I was told here 2 years ago at Mobilize Recovery, they said the strongest voices are those families that have lost a child. And that is true. And that is true. And in our groups, we're peer-led grief support first. That's the first thing we do, is we support each other in our grief. But when there's an action, I'll be the first one to say, hey, this is going on. Who wants to join me? And that's when they'll all pipe up and say, I'm there. I'll show up. I'll be there. I'll do it. And those are the voices. And they're the voices of our children, because we'll never stop saying their lives mattered.
So I'd love to take a moment to open it up to questions from the audience as well. I know we've sort of talked a lot about our own virtual stories. How are we on time? 15 minutes? Okay. Do folks have questions, or do you want us to continue the conversation up here? Yes, back there.
By, and I'm starting to get, thank you, interested, try to, figure out where I belong. I didn't feel like I belonged with the mothers who were advocating on behalf of their children, because you almost feel like there's this feeling that everybody's looking at you as you're the cause of your children's, issues, and then that spills over. So I commend you on including mothers in recovery as well, because it is generational most of the time. I'm finding that more and more as I'm on the ground, that, I used to think that we were unique. And the more I get out there, the more work I do, I begin to realize how much it's not unique. I mean, nearly every household I could think of has some degree of something going on in the household, right? But it's the key here is to remember that it's not indicative of something you did wrong. It is just the way things are. We're human, and this is what happens. And so I think it's great, because in 2011, that wasn't the case. So thank you.
Do we have other questions?
I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you that I signed the proclamation on the website, so we can do it right here. Everyone can do it right here on their phones, drugfree.org, and go into advocacy. So just want to let you know.
Thank you, Tonya. I thank you so much, everybody. Just a lot of gratitude for the change you're making. And I have a question about, you were driven by these close relationships and traumatic experiences. And as you said, right, there's no more powerful group than you all. And I'm wondering, how do you empower those who are affected, but not in the same way? And I think of my own journey, and my parents wanted to forget it. They're like, you're done. Like, your treatment's done. Good. All right, let's move on. So getting them empowered. I mean, not now. It's a little harder for them, or my mom. But how do you empower those who don't have that fire that you have? How do we get other family members who want to forget it, other family members who think this is just a little part, even though under 9, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of family recovery that needs to happen, but being loud about it is not something. Anna said in the last session, right? Family members don't want to talk about it. They want to keep it in the house. So I'd love to hear a little about your thoughts on how to empower those who might want to hide a little bit more.
I think that's a great question, Fred. And I think, on our little card, not to plug the card again, but it says your story can change someone else's. So I think when people get distance from something and they're kind of ready, they're healed and ready to speak up, I think helping people understand that all the pain that their family went through, that doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be the way it is. And there can be more options, there could be more resources, and just kind of helping people understand that their experience is really important to share. And yes, it's painful, and you probably want to just put it in the rearview mirror, but it's really important for people to stand up and speak up. And one of the reasons why our field is so underfunded and so much further behind other disease categories is because so many people have put it in the past and have not wanted to speak up. So I would just say that, we really need to help people understand that they need to pay it forward and raise their voices. And it can be through something super simple, like the action alert that Tanya just signed, right? Where she did it sitting in her chair, and it probably took you 2 minutes, not even, right? And so it doesn't have to be, going to a Fed Up rally in DC, or, meeting with a state legislator, or giving a speech at an event. It can be something super simple and baby steps. But, I just think back, there was I went to a conference, and a congressman was speaking on a panel, And he kind of yelled at everyone in the audience. It was an addiction conference, and he yelled at everyone in the audience, and he said, what's with you people? When Congress does anything to affect breast cancer funding, our phones are ringing off the hook, our emails are overloaded, our fax machine breaks down. And he's like, we cut your programs and we don't hear a peep. And I really thought of that as a call to action, that like, people have to speak up. It's not a luxury. We have to speak up in order to make a difference. And I hope that people watching and can either take that lesson to heart for themselves or take it to people that they know who aren't speaking up, who just are exhausted and don't want to think about it anymore, and encourage them to really make a difference.
I just wanted to speak to Fred's question for a second because I work for Shatterproof and I over our ambassador program, and a lot of times our ambassadors come with so much energy and they want to make so much change, and they'll sometimes confide in me, but hey, my family's not on board, so I'm only going to be so visible, or I don't have support, so how do I do that? What do I do? But back to your question, Fred, what I've witnessed is oftentimes that comes from a lack of education. People don't know what addiction is, so they're going to be real careful about what they get behind, right? And they're ignorant and they don't want to say they don't know. So I think one thing we can do is to help, sometimes in subtle ways and sometimes out loud, to teach more people what addiction truly is. And I think the second part to that is the stigma. So it's conversations and it's reinforcing, the language and reinforcing this as a disease. But I think my experience of two things that hold people back, the just lack of understanding, and then the stigma that they have.
Just hearing everybody talk about, bringing all perspectives and individuals in recovery who are also family members. One of the things that comes to mind is that I was never aware of the addictive nature in my family until we nearly lost my son when he was 19. And I wish I knew. And so I think it's so important to help people understand. I had my own addictions and I never knew because people celebrated them. They were sports and they were work and they were things that people saw as healthy, right? But they actually nearly destroyed my family because I wasn't available to my son. And what I found was that owning that has been freeing, and people will say, don't blame yourself. And while I don't blame myself for not knowing, I feel it's important to share that and educate others because I do still work in a high stress environment and I hear it every day. Parents and siblings and family members say, I'll be on vacation, but I'm still available. And I say, stop it. Right? Vacation is important for you and the people that you're there with. And I spent probably years of my life on vacation in air quotes. And when my son and I reflect back, what really struck me is that he asked me, what is addiction? And of course, I started going with the technical term. And before I could open my mouth, he said, I had tried a number of things. And the first time somebody gave me a Percocet pill, I wanted to give half of everything I owned for another. And I think that's the message that people need to hear. My son did not choose addiction. He was predisposed, and something that for another was just an experiment for him started a very rapid spiral. So thank you for everything you're doing to raise up our voices.
I think that's a great point, that, letting, even advocating in our daily lives and in, our circles, friend circles and circles at work about what addiction is and that it isn't a choice. And I think that's kind of the first step of advocacy, right? Sort of changing hearts and minds is a really crucial first step. So thank you.
So I think something else when we're talking about stigma is people that suffer with substance abuse disorders, society has dehumanized these people. And so I think when we've lost people, it's so important as we're advocating that we're sharing who was the person, and we don't get so focused on what drug they used or how did they die or what was the struggle, but who was your child? Who was your mother? What did they enjoy? Who were they as a person? Who were they before, they started their battle? That brings the humanization back to the person. And that's where stigma really comes from is, oh, they're an addict or they have a drug problem. But no, that's a person that was and remains a person regardless. And I think that's a huge issue and something that needs to be included in advocacy.
It's a great point. And I think it's a lot of like what you talked about with your brother and the obituary and wanting to make sure that people knew who he was as a person rather than, the final moments.
I've been around addiction my whole life, but my true question is, how do you educate people about being born with addiction? My husband was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and he had already had the addiction with the alcohol before I came into his life. And he got addicted to pain pills because of a car accident that caused that he needed surgery. And then he got addicted to Xanax because he had to give up firefighting. And I didn't understand his part of the addiction until my aunt died of an overdose, which the drugs that were laced caused her to have a cranial hemorrhage, and we took her off life support in 2018. And I watched her battle addiction on and off for 28 years. And when I started getting involved with Shatterproof, it was because of my aunt. And I lost the guy that I was involved with last year to drugs as well that were laced, and I tried to do everything to save him. But it's my husband's story that I never get to talk about because I don't want to offend mothers that have had babies. But I watched my husband that didn't have a choice struggle so much, and people truly don't understand. There are people out there that do not have a choice in what their parents did. And I want to educate people about people like my husband that had the addiction, that suffered so many things throughout his life. And I did everything, and he died of cancer. And all I wanted to do was save him in every way that I could. But he didn't have a choice. And it's like, how do you help the people that truly did not have a choice because of their parents' choices? I don't know. And it's like, I'm just now speaking. He's been gone 10 years. And I've always talked about the cancer. And it's now I finally am trying to, without offending any mother in any way, because I'm trying to advocate all this, is I want to fight for the people that are born with addiction.
Someone want to take that? Sure.
So I think it's important to recognize that this is a family disease. I don't think that gets said enough. It may be someone specifically going through the addiction, but addiction affects the entire family. And until we recognize that, it's gonna continue to be like this. And so it goes back to everything that's been set up here. There's got to be the education piece. And so the more we know about it, the more we know about our children. When we have children born with FAS, that's something very serious, but without a mom being educated again. So if you have mothers coming into early early sobriety and they're not being educated. This is what I mean with the generational curse, right? This gets passed on and on and on. And so this is one of the things that I fight to do. We have to educate the mothers, because if they're using while they're pregnant, of course they're not aware of what they're doing because they're not in the right mindset to know. But yet we're not only penalizing them later on, we're penalizing the children who grow up and who also have substance use disorders. And so I think it always goes back to education.
Hi, my name is Deanna Brooks. I lost my daughter to fentanyl poisoning December 10th, 2017. And through most of us here, through my pain, I'm turning that into purpose. I started a nonprofit. And I just want to touch on the stigma and see if any of you have had to deal with that, whether it be family members, or I guess I should say how you deal with that. Some of the things we really strive for is raising awareness, because we have dealt with so much stigma. I could tell you stories. For the sake of time, I won't. But we just recently helped a gentleman with transitional housing. And I literally had one of my board members saying, while he still did not have a roof over his head, is he looking for work? In 2008, while I was earning my master's degree, I became homeless due to the economy. And I said to my board member, yeah, no, we're going to see if he has a place to sleep tonight before we start looking for the job. And once we got him into a full-time housing situation, I said to him, how do you feel? And he said, amazing. And I said, now we can't expect you to be a contributing member of society without a roof over your head. And he said to me, you are the first person that ever has understood that. And I did not know this about him, but he said, this is why I never graduated. When I was in high school and I did not know where I was going to sleep, I could not worry about algebra. And it broke my heart, because I know about the hierarchy of needs. And I knew when I lost my home, if I didn't have a house, I was able to go to my mother's house, but I certainly knew if I didn't have a house, I couldn't worry about a job. So there's so much stigma. And for him, he felt that nobody understood that, but it seems so logical. But there are so many things out there that seem so logical to us who have dealt with this. In my work, I have set up tents and tried to pass out literature to people with this fentanyl crisis. We need education. This is crazy. If this was a Tylenol crisis back in the day, we literally shut down the country. I studied Tylenol as a success story in my business degrees. Like, what are we doing? We need to educate, but how do you deal with the stigma and the uneducated people that some don't even care to be educated? They want to toss my daughter aside. Some people are still using the term junkies. It's maddening to me. So I just want to know how you guys deal with that in your everyday life.
Carlia, this reminds me of the story that you told me about the childcare vouchers. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So one of the hardest things I deal with are when I send my ladies to, when they come into the program and once they've been awarded custody back of their children, they have to, I send them for childcare vouchers. And one of the things that gets really frustrating is they want them to show 3 to 4 pay stubs before they're willing to give them the vouchers. And so the fight becomes, okay, well, if they can't get childcare to go to work, then how are they going to show you the vouchers? And so again, this is just something, it is very frustrating, because for me, I'm trying to meet a need. And so I hear you loud and clear. If we do not continue to knock the doors down, I can't stress it enough, and Cheryl has said it, and Jacqueline has said it. If we do not continue to advocate and we just give up and we lay down, there are so many people that are going to suffer and die from this disease. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep talking. We have to go to whoever we need to, because I don't stop fighting for those ladies to get what they need to be able to be the mothers that they need to be. And so I encourage you to just keep using your voice.
Do we have time for one more, or are we?
More.
One more? Okay. Last question. Sure. Oh, there's someone in the back who hadn't asked a question before.
I just wanted to speak to stigma. If we don't change the language, then we're never going to get people to get on board with what we're trying to do to help. We've got to get rid of the word junkie. We've got to get rid of clean, dirty, and those kinds of things, because they do matter. Typically, people don't understand addiction till it happens to them, because that's what happened with me. My son is in recovery now. He's 34, but I didn't know anything. When he became addicted to OxyContin, a doctor prescribed it, and it was just a downhill slide from there. But we took him to detox the first time he decided to go to treatment, and he said, "I just need to detox." And I said, "Okay." And I thought that was it. You know, he detoxed, and we brought him home, and he probably used 5 minutes after he got home, because I didn't know. And so it was a succession of treatment centers and those kinds of things. But through this, I'm learning, I'm listening, and went back to school, got my degree in addiction studies. And now people who are still embarrassed, because I'm not, it's no different to me than if he had diabetes. I'm not embarrassed. I don't care. And now it's like a little pipeline. Let's go ask Tammy, she'll know. And people call me all the time that are still embarrassed. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do, but I do. And if I don't, I get on the phone. So it's something that they're going to have to, we've got to get over this. It's a disease. It runs in my family. My grandfather was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. By the grace of God, it skipped me, but it went to my kids. I feel terrible guilt. You know, why did I get missed and they had to suffer? But for that reason, I fight. I'm not scared. We got a harm reduction center in my community. I'm in the Bible Belt. We had to like sneak around to do it, but we did it. And so things can be done. Don't ever think that because you're in a town that it's small and small-minded, somebody else is going through this too. I don't want to go to another funeral. No, we shouldn't be burying children. It's just, we've got to do something, and now's the time.
Thank you so much.
You know, if I can say real quick, so when my son Corey died, February 24th, 2011, and we were writing the obituary, and I'll never forget this because he was somebody. He was my child, and it didn't matter to me. I wanted to be, and I probably would have been the first one to write that he died from an overdose, but he was somebody. But my husband said to me, "No, I don't think we should put that in the obituary. Why don't you just say he was a friend of Bill W.'s?" And that's what we did. And I regret that to this day, because that was I think part of, stigma. But as we continue to educate, you're always going to have the ones that are going to call them junkies. You can try to educate them, but they've already got their minds made up. But we just continue doing what we're doing, continue doing things like this, go out and advocate, and we're going to make a difference. We're going to make change.
I want to thank you all for coming today, and I want to thank everyone on this panel for a really great discussion. Thank you.